This is the Osee GoStream Deck Duet. It's the newest small format multiple video input switcher and streaming encoder from Osee, and it's almost identical to the original Osee GoStream Deck with 4 HDMI inputs, 2 HDMI outputs, 2 USB-C ports, 2 3.5mm audio ports, a dedicated headphone jack, a network port, tons of buttons on top for full control of this video switcher without the need for a laptop, a physical T-bar for manual transitions, and an SD card slot for loading still images, playing back video, and recording to that SD card, all in this little package. But the Duet has a little something else up its sleeve, and that's 4 SDI inputs on the side, giving this tiny video switcher a big advantage in terms of overall I/O and keeping your footprint small by removing much of the need to have multiple external SDI to HDMI converters if you need to ingest a mix of HDMI and SDI signals. Just keep in mind that it's either or. You can use the HDMI or the SDI input for any of the 4 individual inputs at a time. So for example, you can still use the HDMI input for input 1, but use the SDI input for inputs 2 and 3, and the HDMI input maybe for input 4, or any mix of those as you need. So you don't get 8 active inputs just by the addition of the 4 SDI ports on the side. But you do have a 5th video input option via one of the USB-C ports on the back, which you can use to plug in a standard web camera like this Logitech webcam and use a web camera as that 5th video input if you need. It can receive NDI-HX signals as a video input on the aux from your local network. If you don't want to use that second USB slot for a web camera, you can always use it for an external USB-C solid-state drive to go in the rear and record to or play back files from. You can use USB slot number 1 on the back to ingest video into your computer. It has 3 built-in streaming encoders, and you can stream directly from the switcher, and you can get everything set up and running and change all of the settings with the buttons on the Duet and with the on-screen menu built into the GoStream Deck Duet without having to hook up a laptop at all, just to get everything set up and running. That's a lot, but the biggest feature for me is having the option of SDI or HDMI inputs all included in this one small streaming and video switching device. These new SDI inputs just give you more options for receiving professional video signals and keeps your setup clean and organized. And it's only about a 1/2 inch wider than a Blackmagic ATEM Mini. And for clarity, Osee did reach out to me and sent me this GoStream Duet. I agreed to make a video about it. No money changed hands, but I do get to keep the switcher. So I'm not going to go into every setting and option on the GoStream Deck Duet because it's a pretty fully functioning video switcher, and there are a lot of options and settings and a lot of other videos out there that go deep into those menus. But I will give a general overview of the features and what to me makes this switcher possibly better than some of the competition, and a few things that I don't like that maybe could be better or just work differently than other switchers in this category, or in some cases maybe not as good as some of those other brands and models. And if you're at all video centric and already use video switchers, then you'll be able to dig into the menus and find what you need quickly. So I'll expect you to have some aptitude of operating this type of equipment. But basically, the GoStream Deck Duet is obviously a very small form factor video switcher. It can handle up to 1080p 60 maximum on the inputs and the outputs. It has 5 available live video inputs, those 4 HDMI or those new SDI inputs on the side. And again, that 5th input utilizing as an option that USB-C port on the back for ingest of a webcam. And just like Osee's original GoStream Deck, it has 2 HDMI outputs, which is a con of the ATEM Mini line. There's a single HDMI output on these smaller ones. And with the most recent firmware, you can route any of the inputs, the multiview, preview, or program to either or both of those HDMI outputs. The GoStream Deck series has 2 rows of buttons for selecting your sources. The bottom row is your preview bus, and those light up green when your preview is active, while the top row is your program bus, and of course, those are the standard red. And coming back to that SD card slot on the front, again, you can insert a card and record onto that SD card, or you can record onto an external USB drive connected to that second USB port on the back, but you only get a single recording. It does not record each input individually as a separate file. That's often called ISO recording, which the competing ATEM Mini ISO products will record each input separately, but the GoStream Deck series just records a single signal. But you can set that recording to be your program or any one of the individual inputs or the aux input, or you can record your multiview if you really wanted to. But just keep in mind that the streaming and USB feeds are also tied to that same recording bus. So you can't record your multiview or a single input while outputting program to your live stream or over to your computer via USB. You can load still images and video files onto an SD card or onto a USB-C drive and load the still images into the internal storage of the switcher for static backgrounds, and those images will stay on the switcher even if you take the SD card out. But for playing back video files from that SD card, you'll need to leave the SD card in the switcher. But you can play back those video files from the SD card or again from that attached USB-C drive directly using the buttons on the GoStream Deck right here on the top right, kind of giving you another video source for pre-recorded content with audio without having to use up an input with a laptop. So you could run some entire video productions with just this switcher, depending on your content. The two 3.5mm audio input ports will only accept stereo audio, not balanced audio. You can set the audio inputs to accept a line level input or a mic level input, or even set it to MIC+power, so you can use a small, maybe on-camera microphone that needs a small amount of voltage, like a Rode Video Micro, or even this Movo VXR10, because small microphones like this need a little bit of voltage from inputs on cameras, or from the voltage you can get out of the GoStream Deck Duet on one of those mic inputs when you set it to MIC+power in the software control. It does have some NDI functionality to receive an NDI video feed over your local network, but as of the latest firmware, it will only accept the NDI HX protocol, which is a lower bitrate version of NDI and is somewhat limited to certain cameras that have that codec pre-installed, or you can purchase an NDI HX license for something like your smartphone and use your smartphone as that NDI HX source. Unfortunately, it will not accept standard NDI signals, and utilizing the NDI HX ingest feature will require purchasing an NDI license for the GoStream Deck Duet. All right, I mentioned it has two USB-C ports on the back. The top port, USB 1, is used for connectivity to a computer for use as a USB capture device using the UVC protocol into programs like OBS, Vmix, or even just directly to Zoom or Google Meets. And you can also change what view goes to the USB-C port. So if you wanted to, you could output your multi-view to your USB-C port while having HDMI 1 be preview and HDMI 2 be program, as long as you install the latest version 2.1.0 firmware. The bottom USB-C port, USB 2, can be used for either the aforementioned USB webcam option or obviously to plug in a hard drive for recording to or playing back files from. You've got built-in picture-in-picture options, super source for side-by-side shots or custom layouts, upstream keys for green screens or Luma keys, downstream keys for things like lower thirds, so you can put your name down here, very nice. Mix effects like a simple fade, or horizontal, vertical, or any number of different wipe effects, or even circular or diagonal wipes. A dip to a color before your next transition, like black, white, or any color you choose. And you can even set your transition to preview only, so you can preview what that will look like when you use it in program. And I find that a great use for this is color matching cameras. You can set the transition to preview and set it to a vertical side-by-side wipe, for example, and then using the T-bar, bring in the wipe so it stays in the middle or wherever you need it to match up your talent. I'm not doing a very good job here, but there, let's say I had two cameras and I had my talent where I could match up their face in two different cameras, and then I could tell each camera operator to make adjustments at their camera or use the camera CCUs that I might have sitting beside me to color correct those cameras myself, all while still sending another view out to program while I'm doing this in preview. It does have some macro recording functionality, so you can record certain moves or things you want to do, and it has dedicated buttons to recall those macros. I haven't had a lot of time to play with that or record anything, but there are some options on the GoStream Duet for recording those macros. And as I mentioned, it has built-in streaming encoding right on the device without the need for a computer. You can copy those keys from your streaming service, import them here, and choose between any of the services that you need, like YouTube, Twitter, Restream IO, Vimeo, Boxcast, Facebook. And you can see right here on the menu, I've got Stream 1 set to Vimeo, I've got Stream 2 to Facebook, and I've got Stream 3 to Twitch. And as long as all my streaming keys are loaded properly and those services are ready to accept my feed, I hit the live button and the GoStream Deck Duet will stream to all 3 locations at the same time. It has a power button so you can turn it on or off without having to unplug the switcher. I bring this up because comparing again to Blackmagic switchers do not have power buttons, and it can be unproductive and a little bit unprofessional to always have to unplug or replug in your switcher just to turn it on or off, especially when you just want to save some power and maybe turn it off for the night. So having a power button, I really like. And of course, as you've seen a little bit, it has that built-in on-screen menu using the menu button on the GoStream Deck and the knob just above that button. And the on-screen menu only comes up on whichever output you have your multiview on, so that's good. It means the on-screen menu will never come up over your preview or program main feeds. Again, comparing to Blackmagic, with Blackmagic equipment, you often have to plug those switchers into a computer or set them up on a network just to change certain settings or access certain things that they don't have a button for on the switcher. But they recently came out with their own dedicated software control app for Windows or Mac that has the same functionality you get with the on-screen menu, so you could also just use a laptop for control if you wanted. And I really like having a software option on a computer, and I'm glad that they finally came out with one because that on-screen menu only comes up over the multiview video bus. So if you have both of your HDMI outputs set to maybe preview and program respectively, and then you want to access the menu, you won't see the menu on HDMI output 1 or 2. I made this mistake and I couldn't see or access the menu, but luckily I had already installed the software control and I was able to send multiview over to my computer so I could then see the on-screen menu in OBS and get everything back to where I need it to. So just be careful about that. And if you've noticed at all, that on-screen menu does cover up your input 4 and the lower right side of the multiview, which is set to the audio mixer. So anytime you've got that on-screen menu going, you're covering that up. So it is something to note. You can always put number 4 in preview right there. That is my computer screen in case you have the menu up and you can't see it, but not always ideal, but I still just really like having that on-screen menu at my fingertips at any time. And there is an available plugin module for BitFocus Companion so that you can control the GoStream Deck Duet with an Elgato Stream Deck. It's not a default part of the Companion package when you download Companion and install it, so you have to manually install the module. It took me a bit and some emails back and forth with Osee, and actually I found the answer on the Facebook users group of exactly where to put that package. You have to get the package from Osee, from their downloads. I'm not sure if it's publicly available yet, but I got it installed, and as you can see here, if I hit Cam 4 preview on my Stream Deck over here, then I can control everything from there. Go camera 3. Haven't tested everything, but it is an option that you can get installed and control everything from an Elgato Stream Deck. So again, that's a lot, and that's the general overview. And if you want to stick around, I wanted to touch on a few details as I've been using the Duet and testing it a lot here in my home office. And so far it's worked very well, but let's dig into a few more things. You can't see at a glance which audio channels are on. You have to first press the channel you want to view to see if that audio channel is on or off. And once you select the channel, the AFV and the on button and the control knob are then controlling that audio input channel. So mic 1 here is on, and the control knob will control the after fader level. To see which other channels are on, you have to actually select that channel, and you can see mic 2 is not on. N1 is on, so I've got the audio coming from that camera going to the program recording for the GoStream Deck Duet, but you then have to keep selecting the channels to see whether they're on or off, etc. But at least you can see which channels are on or off and make changes and adjust, again, their after fader level with that control knob. The only way to adjust the input level for those channels, that is the pre-fader gain, would be to go into the software control, either with the on-screen menu down in the audio mixer section, or by connecting the software control, going to audio mixer and selecting the input gain for any of the channels right there. But you can always see which channels are on by looking at the audio mixer on your multi-view screen. And having that dedicated headphone port is great. However, it can be difficult to get the proper volume in just your headphones because there is no dedicated headphone volume knob for just that headphone port. You can adjust the headphone port volume by going to the menu in the software, then go to audio mixer, monitor, then adjusting this level here. However, this level adjustment in the software will also affect the embedded audio level going to both your multiview and or your preview outputs. But luckily it does not affect the program audio. So if you have your HDMI 1, say, set to program, then changing that monitor level in the software will not affect the embedded audio going to, again, anywhere you have that program audio sent, be it the USB port or one of the HDMI ports. So a bit quirky, a dedicated headphone volume knob, or at the very least a dedicated headphone level in the menu would have been a lot better, especially depending on which headphones you use, the impedance of those headphones, which will determine how much level you need to send to them from any headphone jack. And if you're listening closely to the audio in this, I've tried not to do a lot of processing because I want you to hear the fans a little bit. I've got them set to auto. They are a little louder than normal, so in quiet environments, you may want to have them a little bit further away from your microphone. In live event environments, you're probably not going to hear the fan noise when you're in a bigger room with a crowd of people, but the fans on this are definitely louder than something like the Blackmagic 810 Mini Malls. I've never heard the fan on these. I'm definitely hearing the fan right now. You can probably hear it in the recording a little bit. It's there, so be aware of it. The inputs will not recognize any 4K signals at all, nor can it send out 4K on the outputs. And it will not downscale a 4K signal either. So if you're sending a 4K signal from something like your camera, the switcher just won't even see it. It will just be black until you change your camera or other video source to output 1080p maximum at 60 Hertz or 60 frames per second or less. However, each video input does have a frame rate converter built in. This is often called a scaler, so you can have different frame rates from your cameras or other sources coming in, and the switcher will just accept those different frame rates and convert them to the frame rate that you set in the switcher. So I can send any of those frame rates into the switcher at the same time as long as they're 1080p maximum. I can send that one at 23.98, I can send that one at 29.97, and I can send the overhead shot at an even 30p if the camera will do that. And actually, if you look here on my input 4, that is a feed directly from my laptop, and that is actually feeding in at 60 Hertz or 60 frames per second. And if I put that in program, you can see here, if we go down to my displays, that if I pick the GoStream Deck as my output, you can see 60 Hertz, which equals 60 frames per second. So again, the switcher is converting that because I have the output of my switcher, the master output, set to 1080p 30 right there. So the recording that I'm getting on the switcher is 1080p 30, converting from 23.98, and 60 frames per second with my computer and any other frame rates that I might be feeding into it. You can set what each input will see, either the HDMI signal or the SDI signal, and you can do that independently on every input. So input 1 can be HDMI, while input 2 is SDI, and on down the line to 3 and 4. And by default, if we go to the menu here, scroll down to the source selection, we can see that they're all set to SDI right now, which means they're going to see that first. So if you have an active signal coming into the SDI port, it will override the HDMI signal. Or you could always just tell input 2 to look at the HDMI all the time by setting that here in the menu. But by default, each input is looking at the SDI first, which is kind of like an automatic source selection. So if I disconnect my camera 2 here, that camera goes away, and you can see in my preview, input 1 is that camera. But since here in the menu, input 1 is set to SDI, and there's an active camera signal coming down this SDI line, if I plug that in, input 1 will then recognize that instead of the HDMI input. So I could change that in the menu if I wanted to. I could just say, you know what, in 1, even though I've got an SDI signal, I want it to look at HDMI, and now we're back to HDMI. So I usually leave those to SDI, knowing that if I have an active SDI signal, it's going to use that before the HDMI. Again, knowing that I can always go back into the menu and manually set that to HDMI if I wanted to. And if you are using HDMI, you've got a few more options. You can go HDMI auto, or you can tell it what range of blacks and whites, either legal range or full range, that you're sending from that camera. So you can put HDMI RGB full, or HDMI RGB limit, which is legal range, So I usually leave that on SDI, and here in the menu, being able to set each input to what you want it to see means that you could just always have cables plugged into the side and the back, HDMI in the back, obviously SDI on the side. You could just have those cables plugged in, going to maybe a patch bay in the back of like a rack situation if you were to mount this. And that way you could just leave those cables plugged in and go into the menu and just select what you wanted instead of always having to unplug and replug cables just to have it see one input or the other. So to touch just a little bit on the streaming to those 3 locations, I'm not going to get into this too deeply right now because of the way I'm recording. But you can see here in the on-screen menu, if we scroll down to stream, you've got stream 1, stream 2, and stream 3. And you can enable those, which you would need to do. Enabling it here on the output means that when I hit live, it's going to go to that destination, assuming you've uploaded the right key into the GoStream Deck Duet. So here I've got stream 1 set to Facebook, it's on. I've got stream 2, we can set that to YouTube, and it's currently off, which means if I hit the live button, stream 2 is not going to go anywhere, and stream 3 is currently off as well. That's going to Twitch. But we can enable YouTube as well right here, turn it on. And what we would need to do is go to the streaming platform, the back end, our own logins to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, wherever it is, copy that streaming key to a text file, put that text file in the right directory on the SD card, put that SD card back in the Duet, and come back here to your stream. And then if the key is in the right location on the SD card, you can then go here and select that there is a YT-1 TXT. That's the key that I got for YouTube the other day. And I've got FB1, that's for Facebook. I got it working the first time that I got a key loaded. So very easy to use, especially if you're familiar with streaming and streaming keys and all that. I think small switchers like these are great for a lot of things, and I'm very happy that within the past 4 to 5 years, things have really gotten as tiny as this switcher, but still with so much functionality and I/O. Having multiple input options built into such a small device can really make for a clean, compact, and streamlined setup, and can eliminate the need for multiple HDMI to SDI converters. And you may actually see one here on my desk because I don't have an SDI camera that I can ingest, so I did have to convert this Sony ZV-1 over to SDI just so I could use the SDI input here to show as an example. But if you already have SDI sources coming to you from camcorders or more professional cameras that have SDI outputs, then you wouldn't need a lot of converters like this sitting behind the switcher, and that would make everything, again, so much tighter and clean. And I think one of the major complaints, definitely a complaint of mine from Blackmagic, is that on these mini models, even on the extreme models, they're either HDMI only or SDI only. None of their mini products have HDMI and SDI, and I think that's where the Osee GoStream Deck Duet has little switchers like this beat. And being able to control everything without a laptop, even building side-by-side and supersource layouts with moving backgrounds and queuing up and being able to preview your downstream keys, your lower thirds, playing back video files, recording, all of that makes for a really compelling little production switcher package, which at the launch of this Duet model, the price is only about $400 US. Now, I have had the unit randomly reboot a few times. It seemed to happen at least once when unplugging and plugging in HDMI cables or the SD card. And once when that happened, the audio mixer on the multiview screen wasn't showing up correctly and some of the info was missing, but manually rebooting after that did fix the weird visual problem on the multiview audio mixer. And it's hard to pinpoint anything that specifically caused these issues, and I can't seem to recreate it on purpose. So with any new hardware or firmware, be cautious about the types of events and productions that you deploy this on. Again, this is new firmware, and some of those reboots may have been because it's, I think, still beta firmware. It may be the public release, but it's the first version of the firmware that allows that software control, so they may still be working through a few of those things. And I will say that I've had the fan control set to low quite a bit. You can set it to auto, high, or low, so maybe the unit got too hot during those times, or again, it could be the new firmware, which could obviously be resolved with a future firmware upgrade. Now, I haven't used a lot of products from Osee. They are a Chinese-based company, but their communication and customer service and answering questions about my unit here have been very quick and informative, and maybe this video and others will help them continue working on their great features and any issues that I or you may encounter. Brands like Blackmagic Design are much more well-established and road-tested, But I've had a lot of problems with these ATEM minis over the past few years. This one actually doesn't work on inputs 1 and 2 anymore. I've had them stop recording and corrupt recordings and just being unresponsive, and had to hard reboot them by unplugging the power and plugging it back in. So Blackmagic is far from being perfect either. And I've had a lot of fun testing and using the features of this tiny Osee GoStream Deck Duet. So obviously there are definitely some things that are a bit quirky or don't work exactly like I think they should or how I want them to, but overall I think there's a lot of functionality here that will keep your setup small and organized. And I think that's going to be it for this video. So if you like this video, I hope you did. Be sure and hit those like and subscribe buttons below. They really help out my channel and help me continue bringing you content like this and going over as much as I can go over in the limited time that I have in my somewhat busy life. So for now, that's it, and I will see you on the next one. Later.